Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining me for this week's episode of When I Grew Up. On today's episode, it is my pleasure to introduce you to my friend Mike Sohn. Hi Mike, how are you?
Hey Blair, how's it going?
It's going well. Thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that we met like through mutual friends and stuff, but and I kind of know your story a little bit just through actually I think you did a workshop, right, for our church?
Yeah. We, my wife Jean and I, we did a workshop at your church. We talked about financial literacy, and so yeah,
Well, I'm excited to get into that
yeah,
later on in our conversation tonight. But before we do, can you tell me what it is that you do, Mike?
sure. So what I do, the best way, and I've tried to explain this to multiple people over like 20 years. The best way I can explain it now is I have a job like Chandler Bing from Friends. And so the more I try to explain it, the more people tune out. And so basically, I'm going to try again to explain it to you and
Okay,
see if this works.
I'm
And so
ready.
um, anytime you buy something from somewhere, like you go to a gas station and buy a bag of chips,
Mm-hmm.
it's there because somebody sold it and made it appear on that shelf, right?
Okay.
And so that's happening everywhere you go. Everything you buy, like you're buying it, but someone is selling it to get there. And so my job is to make sure those people that sold it
Uh-huh.
get paid the right amount of money for selling that stuff to get to that point. And so
Okay.
it's called sales performance management. But basically I work with a bunch of data and make sure people get paid the right amount of stuff for the right amount of
Okay.
the
I
right
mean,
amount of
so
money.
that
Yeah.
concept is like I believe I understand it.
Yeah.
But so um I guess my question now is you said you work with a lot of
Yes.
data to get
Yes.
the information that you
Yeah.
need to make sure
Yep.
your client is getting the
Uh-huh.
money that is
Yes.
promised to them?
Yeah, it's like their commission check, you know? So when someone's making all these sales, they could be doing it at like um, levels where, you know, there's like millions of transactions happening in a
Uh-huh.
week, you know? So these are like massive companies I'm talking about
Okay.
now. So to expand it more, like these companies have like huge sales forces of like thousands of people going out and like selling their stuff to appear wherever we buy it.
Okay,
And so
yes.
all those salespeople are making all these sales, millions of transactions coming in, but they have like nuances of like how much they get paid if they sell this product or this other product, or what's their market share, or like all these different rules that apply. And so for companies to try to do that all like manually or with Excel spreadsheets,
Mm-hmm.
it can be tough to do and tough to audit.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's these other companies that have software that can take that information and you can apply logic and make sure like it's automated and everyone's getting their commission money and everyone's happy and they're getting paid well. And so that there's a whole industry that it's called sales performance management, and that's what we do. It's a very niche industry.
Mm-hmm.
Like once you're in it, you kind of see the same names appear over and over. Even as you move companies, you're like, oh, this is like a small world, a small group of people that are in this
Mm.
industry. But that's what we do. So
Okay,
yeah,
interesting. I'm like
yeah,
so fascinated by the fact that like I would never think of this.
yeah. I would never either. I know, because you're just like buying stuff and you're like, oh, this is what I want. But like, you know, for that product to get there, people have sold it probably a number of different channels or avenues, and so those people are getting paid some big
Okay.
bucks sometimes. So
Um okay, for example,
yeah,
sorry.
yep, yep,
So like say I buy something online from Nordstrom's, right?
yeah,
But what you're
yeah,
saying is like so I buy like a brand name product. I can't even like
yeah,
Nike, okay?
yeah,
And
yeah,
then so you're saying Nike sold that to Nordstrom's,
yep,
right? But
yep,
then the person that sold that
yeah,
product to Nordstrom's has
Yeah.
to get paid. But you're saying there are a lot of people doing this with different companies. Like a lot of Nike
Yeah.
products are being sold to different companies.
Yeah. And then that person who's selling to Nordstrom, that person probably has a boss, and that person has a boss, and they need to get paid based on how that person's doing. And so like all these salespeople who have like this very transferable skill, they're just selling, and then they expect the more they sell, the more they get paid. But
Okay.
it's not as simple as like $1 for every shoe. You know, it can get
Right,
pretty
right.
complicated. Yeah.
Okay, so now can I ask you, so I understand what it is generally
Yeah.
what you do, but like
Yeah.
specifically what is like your job? Like is it
Okay.
yes.
So my job, I'll tell you my title, and then I'll tell you how I see my job.
Okay, okay.
So my title is, I think, and I haven't looked in a while. It's senior consultant um, of SPM, like senior sales performance management consultant. But really, I'm like, if we have our system that's running and doing all this stuff,
Mhm.
I'm like the mechanic and the detective for the system. So
Mm.
somebody already built it. Someone
Mhm.
already like was the builder of it.
Mhm.
And now sometimes things change or things break or the data's bad. And so they need people to look into the issues and explore and like figure out how to solve issues. So I'm like the mechanic,
Mhm.
or, you know, if something is right, they just don't know why. I'm like the detective that has to go in and explain, okay, this is like this because of all these different logical pieces that you said you wanted. And so it's built that way. And um, so that's my job. I'm like a mechanic or a detective for a data system.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so like how did you become familiar? I mean, I would assume you need to know the system very well.
Yeah. And so I've done this enough times. So this is actually my second stint. So my career kind of took a detour for a little bit. And I can talk about this later. But early in my career, when I just graduated college, I was the builder. I was building these systems, and I was like having to know all the rules and all the logic and like build it from scratch. And then you build enough of these things where you can kind of just look at it and investigate without really being the builder. And so now in my second stint in this career,
Mhm.
I'm much more comfortable. Like I don't need to know how somebody built it. Um, they don't need to explain it to me because I can just go in and like find things by myself. And so
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
so it's been an evolution. So now it's more of like I'm like a glorified help desk person. And so so honestly, like there's these tickets that come in,
Mhm.
and I have to respond by a certain time.
Mhm.
But it's not like you can just hire someone off the street to do this. Like you
I
have to know
see.
what you're doing. But
Mhm.
like it's like Apple Genius Bar. Like there's goals I need to meet and time that I have to fix things within.
Okay.
Um, but but it's like it's fun. Like I I can train people in this. Like so, it sounds kind of complicated, but if you can think logically and just follow numbers,
Mhm.
you can do my job. So
Okay.
I've trained uh, a former when I was a Bible study teacher at KCPC. There was a former student of mine who he didn't know what he wanted to do, and so I said, "Hey, come check out what I do," and I just kind of showed him what I do, and like over time we developed a relationship, and I hired him, and then he worked with me, and then now he's doing this stuff at another level with a different company. And so
Oh, wow.
it just takes someone who has a little bit of willpower and
Mhm.
just can think logically, and they can do this job.
Okay, so I guess that's my next question, or was
Yeah,
going to be, you said think logically, but
yeah,
so there's a lot of numbers involved.
yeah, yeah. There's a lot.
Okay.
It's just numbers and like patterns that are involved. And so if
Okay.
you can just kind of like, so part of why I think I'm pretty good at this job is because, and this is going to go into like how I got to this job, but
Mhm.
um, I loved doing brain teasers when I was younger. Like all these like
Ah,
riddles and brain teasers, those like lit me up, and I was like, oh, this is so fascinating how you can think of these problems in a different way and then have a cool answer or cool approach. And so if you enjoy that kind of thing, then you'd be really good at what I do.
Okay, I do not, but I know there's a lot of people that do.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
um, well, yeah, you were mentioning how you got into it, and you also
yeah.
mentioned that it's kind of a niche group
Mm-hmm.
of people.
Yeah,
Maybe you could even take me back to the beginning, like
sure.
when you started college and stuff, like what you studied.
Yeah, yeah. So I went to school, graduated high school. So I was actually like pretty smart in high school. I did okay. My GPA was good. My SAT scores were good, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. So
Mm,
I went to a state school in New York. So I grew up in New York,
mm-hmm.
went to Binghamton University, which is kind of like the Georgia State
Okay.
of New York. And so I started and majored in math because I was like, let me just try this. I'm good at math. But math got super hard, got super theoretical, and it was like not fun at all. And so I was like, all right, well, let me try programming. My brother was doing
Mm.
like computer science. I took Java. Have you heard of Java?
Yes, I know it's a language,
Yeah, it's like a
right?
programming language. That's about all I know too, because
Yeah.
I took it and I dropped it within the first 3 weeks,
Oh,
and then the
wow.
next semester, I was like, no, I think I can do this. So I signed up, took it again, dropped it again after 3 weeks, and then I did it a third time and dropped it again. So it was like three strikes and you're out. Like I just could not catch on to programming,
Uh-huh.
and
Okay.
so I switched to being a business major, and
Mm.
so transferred to a different school and finished school as a business major. And so um, that was all kind of like in this season of life where you don't really know what you're doing. You're just kind of like taking a guess or like following advice of what you think you're supposed to do. And so that's kind of what I was doing.
Mm.
Um, but my interview process was, I went to like a career day at the school, and a company that was there just kind of picked up my resume, and their interview process was like all brain teasers and riddles. And I was like, oh, like I don't know what this company does, but I can interview and I can like talk about these things because I really enjoyed um, that process of solving problems. And so I kind of stumbled into this job because I liked the brain teasers.
Wow. That
Yeah.
was their interview?
Yeah, they had like it wasn't just the brain teasers, but
Uh-huh.
every round of interviews, like before you could even interview, there were like online tests that you had to take. One was like language based or verbal based, and then another one was like math problems, and then another one was like logical problems, and then you got to interview. But then at the end of every interview, they would ask you two or three brain teasers, like, and you had to solve them on the spot. And it was kind of like stressful, but it was fun to just talk through solving a problem like with someone who's interviewing you.
That is
And so
so interesting to me.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'm sure like a lot of the high tech companies like Google and Facebook, they probably do this a lot. And so
Hmm.
this company was, it was like trying to be one of those, but it was like super small. And so
Okay.
yeah, but but eventually, I just followed the interview process, and
Mm.
then um, had a good vibe about the company. It was like a small startup feel to it,
Hmm. Hmm.
and they were based in Philly, and so I just went with it. And once I got there, then I started realizing, okay, this is like I gotta know data, and I gotta like follow these numbers, and like just start following data through a system. And then once I picked that up, it was super easy. So
Wow.
yeah.
I mean, so that's not has nothing to do with your business degree though, right?
No, no. So it's like I feel like the business degree, it helps. It gives you
Mm.
something to talk about. But it's not like I was running my own business, or I wasn't doing accounting, or I wasn't doing marketing.
Right, right.
I was literally just solving problems for like data problems for companies. And so
Wow.
yeah. Um, so that's kind of what I don't know. It's I'm glad I followed this path because
Hmm.
it fits my strengths,
Mm.
but it wasn't like a proactive step, if
Mm.
you know if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, no, it does
Yeah,
make sense. Just out of
yeah,
curiosity, you were saying you had, your first stint and then your second
yeah,
stint.
yeah.
Is this for the same company?
It's related. So they're all kind of I mean, you can, like I said, it's a small world. And
Uh-huh.
so as long as you have a good reputation, you can kind of just like move
Ah,
around and it's kind of okay, as long as you keep your relationships
I
good.
see. I
And
see.
so the company I started with was based in Philly,
Uh-huh.
but they opened offices in India and Romania. And so I got to go out there and like for 2 years I was overseas and training the local people they were hiring in India and Romania
What?
to do what we do, And then after that time abroad, this was in my mid 20s, so I was like 24 to 26. Then I came back to America and switched companies to a consulting firm that our job was to know these different products that do the sales performance management
Mm-hmm,
thing
mm-hmm.
and just implement that for other companies. And um, so it's that was the company that I ended with, and then now I'm back with them.
I see.
So if that
Okay.
makes sense,
Okay,
yeah,
yeah, that makes
yeah,
sense. That's
yeah,
cool. How was your like was your time in India and Romania like long stints or
yeah. So India was about 4 months,
oh,
and
that's
so
long.
yeah, yeah. Like you're expected to pack up and just go and live there, and you have to you have to dive right into that culture. Like you can't hold on to any like American expectations.
Right?
And so when I was there, I got I got an Indian driver's license, got a scooter, and I was just like, let me just live as much as I can, like how the people here live. So I would eat the food and just all this stuff, wear what they were wearing and just enjoy that culture. And so that was 4 months, and then from there they asked if I wanted to go to Romania, and I said sure, let me just try another country. But that was supposed to be 4 months, and once I got there, I was like, I didn't enjoy it because it was not as different compared to America. It was similar to America, but
Oh.
not the same. And so I kept like bringing bringing my American expectations with me in Romania, and I was a little unhappy for the first few months. But then my another friend came from Arizona, and he got there, and then like we just hit it off. We had a good time, and then I ended up staying like a year and a half longer than I was supposed to
Oh,
because I
wow.
know, yeah. So
Wow. That's
yeah,
crazy. But I mean, you
yeah,
said when you came back you were 26 or something. Is that what
yeah.
you said?
I was probably 26, 27 by that time when
Wow,
I came
you were
back to
so
America.
young when you went to these other countries then.
Yeah, yeah. So that was like that was part of my career story. I worked really hard in the first couple of years of joining this company because
Wow.
there was nothing else. Work was like the epicenter of my life at the time.
Mm.
And so it was work and then basketball. I would play basketball like when I wasn't injured, but um, I put in a lot of hours, and that was a good thing, and probably not super healthy. But I remember like um, there were times where because we work with like people's paychecks, like
Mm-hmm.
things have to be done on time, like you can't be late with certain things.
Mm.
And so there were times where I lived about a mile from the office, and there was one time where there was like a blizzard, like a snowstorm, and it was like a state of emergency in Pennsylvania, but my client needed something done, and this was before we could work remotely. And
Mm-hmm.
so I like bundled up, like dressed up, put on my boots, and I walked to the office. And like how you hear parents say, when I was your age, I used to
Yeah.
walk to school both ways, like uphill. And it was one of those moments for me. It like the walk, there was like uphills both ways. Like it was a hilly walk.
Oh my
And so I
gosh.
walked to my office and like I got the thing done and then walked back home. And like I was doing stuff like that just to show like my you know how much I
Sure.
wanted like a promotion. That's kind of what the
Yeah.
motive was at the time.
Yeah.
So
Wow. That's
so
crazy.
yeah,
Um, you know, as you were talking, I was just wondering, so is it like a because it's small, so is it like kind of
yeah.
competitive too?
I I don't know if it's competitive. it's competitive to get in,
I
but
see.
I think it's more about your perspective on life. Now looking back, I'm like,
Mm,
I was super competitive because that's the only way I knew how to be
right,
in my
right,
career,
right.
because it seemed like opportunities were limited. So whoever was like the hardest worker would get the opportunity. But
Mm-hmm.
now I'm a little more like open-handed, so
Mm,
even though there are like, you know, there are limited opportunities, but I still think you can create some new ones along the way. And so
yeah.
I actually, now I'm in a season where I'm saying no to a lot of things so I can keep my focus on the right thing. And so
Mm,
um, so if someone's thinking about this industry or any industry in general, there's always going to be some opportunity as long as
mm,
your perspective is healthy.
yeah.
So, yeah,
That's great advice. You said keep your
yeah,
focus on the right thing. And what is that
yeah.
right thing for you?
So here's where like in my work, it's all like most the way I see life now, like most organizations, most people, they operate like the mafia or like the mob,
Okay.
It's all just like about relationships and like making sure you're good with the right people that have like the decision making power.
Yeah, I'm like kind of half smiling and laughing because I don't
Yeah.
disagree with you like at
Yeah,
all.
I
Yeah.
know. So this is like, but when you hear this kind of stuff when you're younger, you're like, I don't know, that feels slimy. It feels like icky. But I think
Mm,
the older you get and the more you realize like people have limited time, they can't think about everything like fairly and equally. They're
mm,
gonna default to like who they know and like, do I trust this person?
mm,
And so, um, which by the way, this is another detour, but there's a book called, I wrote it down, The Unspoken Rules by
mm-hmm.
Gorik Ing. And I've been reading it now, and I think it's like super helpful for anyone like just starting off their career.
Mm,
Just he gives this advice. He was like a Harvard grad, and he was realizing like he didn't get a lot of the opportunities. He's like, what is going on? So he studied this
mm.
field, and now I think he's a professor at Harvard, and he's teaching people how to navigate their careers. So he wrote a book called The
Wow.
Unspoken Rules. Yeah.
That seems
So
like really valuable. Unspoken rule.
yeah, The Unspoken Rules.
Okay.
And
Rules.
so
Okay.
yeah, Gorik Ing, pretty sure he's Asian American, and
Mm,
he grew up with like a single mom, and like his story is amazing. And so for any of your listeners, that book I think would help them in their career.
awesome.
But
Thank you.
yeah, but back to the mob mentality, like so I just, at work, I'm just making sure the right people that are my clients are, I just want to know what's their number one thing,
Mm,
and that's it. Like I don't ask about number two. I'm like, what's your top priority?
mm.
Okay, that's where I'm going to spend all my time and energy. And then when I'm done with that, I'll ask you, what's the next top priority? And so that way, we're not wasting time going through a list of 10 things when
Sure.
really they really just want the first thing done, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And so that's what I've been doing, just saying no to everything else. If it's not on that priority list, we don't need to talk about it until it becomes a priority.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's efficient. I feel
Yeah.
like.
Yeah. And it's like a little uncomfortable at first, but once you realize there are certain people that love that, they operate on
Mm,
priorities, and you just ask them like, okay, what's more important, this or that? This. And say, okay, I'm going to work on this. And that's it. See ya. I'll come
yeah.
back when
Yeah.
it's time to work on that.
Yeah. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Um, Mike, I was wondering also, um, I know this wasn't like something you studied or majored. Like,
Yeah.
is there like a major for this? Like, is there something you could have studied in order to be better going into this
Yeah,
field or?
I think so. There's like people that study IT, like information technology,
Okay,
and that can help in this field.
I see.
But I do think like, um, for example, my one of my bosses, he he played tennis with this younger dude, and as they were talking, the guy was like, "Hey, I'm looking for a job," and then that guy works at my company, and he's
Mm,
like really good at what he does because he can just think logically. And
I
so,
see.
yeah, like if anyone wants to reach out to me, and we can have a conversation and maybe see if they're looking to do something.
Yeah,
I don't
this
mind.
sounds extremely like interesting because like I feel like what you're saying is you don't have to be boxed in by your
No.
education in order to do this. But if
Right.
you're a logical thinker,
Yeah.
then this is some maybe a good opportunity for someone
Yes.
to look into it.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Absolutely.
that's really cool. By the way, do you work from home like
I
normally?
I do. And so I've been working from home since like 2009-ish.
Yeah, see, that
And
seems like
then
a big perk, right?
it is amazing. Like um so it fits me as a person. Like
Mm,
I remember growing up, I spent a lot of time like in my bedroom, like stringing a lacrosse stick, for example. Like I was really into
okay.
lacrosse, or I'd be like, when I was even younger, like Ross from Friends, like playing his little keyboard. Like,
You know,
yeah,
Mike, what I'm worried about is like
uh,
I know all of these Friends references, but
yeah,
maybe people listening might not know.
I know, I know. Well,
But
the
I love
Friends,
it. I love it.
yeah, the Friends
Go watch
reunion just
Friends,
came out, so
everybody.
I know. But anyways, like, so I would do a lot of that, just like sitting there, like listening to songs and trying to figure them out, or like stringing a lacrosse stick. And then even in college, everyone would like to study in the library, but
Uh-huh.
I was like, I can't concentrate here. So I'd go back to my room and just study in my room. And so I realized working from home was just like a natural fit. Like it's where I can, be very disciplined and get things done and get things done efficiently. And so
Yeah.
it's not for
Um,
everybody, but yeah.
you have a family, right?
Hmm.
And two little girls, and I too have a family. So David, during the pandemic, working from home, I think he didn't even realize how great it was until he
Yeah.
actually did it.
Yeah.
And even though he doesn't see the kids like while he's working in the basement, I
Hmm.
think even just the presence of him being here
Yeah.
and coming up for lunch and things like
Yeah.
that has really impacted our family. And so I just feel like, wow, so it's like so cool that you've been doing that for so long. It's not because of the pandemic, right? So
No, no, it's not because of the pandemic, but
yeah.
it's yeah. So is he still working from home?
No, well, their company does 1 day a week now. They
Hmm.
actually went back really early.
Hmm.
It's kind of an old school company with a lot of older people that maybe aren't as technologically savvy. So it was
Yeah.
a little bit of a transition for people to work from home.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, unfortunately he is back, but he works from home once a week, which is good.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm sure the kids
But
love
like
that.
for us, like during the pandemic too, like because we realized the impact it had on our family and our kids for him
Hmm.
to be home and eat
Hmm.
lunch together. It's just like one
Hmm.
more touch point, I feel
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
So he usually he like before the pandemic he wouldn't come home for lunch.
Right.
But now because it's only like 10-15 minutes
Okay.
from our house, so now he makes the effort to come home for
Ah,
lunch.
that's
So it's
fun. Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that time is super important. I've heard it said, how do kids spell love? It's Time.
Oh
And
yeah.
so for me and Jean, like early in our marriage, we spent like hours, like tons of hours together because she was a school teacher and she had summers off and I was working from home. And so
Right.
we would just be like with each other for hours and hours. And that was like a big investment in our marriage. And then even with when our first daughter was born, I was working from home. Jean was a stay-at-home mom, and so hours and hours together, just hanging out, like 3 meals a day, and like doing life together. And so
How
that,
special.
yeah, so it was like good times to for a good
Yeah.
investment. Yeah.
Amazing. Well,
Hmm.
I really want to get into what we said we are going to talk about later, which
Yeah.
is now.
Yeah.
um, you said you did two stints, but could you
Yes.
expand on like why was there a break in between your work
Okay.
stints?
So what happened was, now looking back, I went from my day job, which was what I was doing, and then I transitioned to what was like a dream job,
Hmm.
that was working at a local church. And now I'm in a new season where my most important job is to be a dad. So it's like my dad job. So from my day job to my dream
Mm,
job to now my job as a dad. And
interesting.
so the dream job came about, and I still love everything about it. It just wasn't a sustainable job for the season we were in. But it
Mm-hmm.
was at working at Gwinnett Church as a groups director for the high school ministry. And so
Amazing.
because we were while I was at my day job, we were volunteering a ton at our local church, KCPC, as you know, Bible study teachers for the high school ministry. And then we transitioned to Gwinnett Church and did the same thing. We were involved as small group leaders at Inside Out, which is what Gwinnett Church calls their high school ministry. And we loved everything about it, like just pouring into younger people and just giving some of your time away was like so satisfying for us. It kind of gave us a sense of purpose, and it still does. And so, um, as we were volunteering there, they approached Jean first and asked if she wanted to come on staff. And so she got a job working at church as a part-time coordinator for the middle school ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And then a couple months later, they asked me if I wanted to work there, and I said yes. And so um, it it was an awesome 3.5 years working at Gwinnett Church.
Oh wow,
And
you're
so
there longer than I actually thought, but that's
yeah, yeah,
amazing.
yeah. And so part of that was you know we kind of took a bump in or a cut in pay. And
Mm.
so to go from what I was doing with IT and data to go work for a church, it was a pay cut, but we were prepared to handle that, and that was like worth the risk for us.
Yeah.
And so 3.5 years of doing that, but along the way, having kids and raising a family of our own,
Mm.
and both of us working in student ministry,
Mm-hmm.
and both of us loving our jobs and caring about our jobs, but also having to figure out the work-life balance.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it became clear like one of us should own the home, and the other one should continue on and like stay on the mission of the church. And so I decided like let me just put some feelers out back with people I used to work with and see if I can get anything anytime soon. And
Mm.
that happened really quick. It like they were ready to hire me back. And so and I was excited. And so yeah, so I made the change back to work from home in IT.
Wow. I
Yeah.
mean, what a call, Like I
Yeah.
mean, 'cause like being in ministry, right?
Yeah.
Like in church ministry too, and
Yeah.
doing God's work in that capacity, right, is a calling in itself. And in the, you call it your dream job.
Hmm.
That's what you refer to it as. And I think it's just such a testament to who you guys are as a family to be like, you know what, this is my dream job, but my calling right now is to take care of our family in this capacity and serve the
Yeah.
kingdom of God this way is like
Yeah.
so amazing. Like I think it's so amazing.
Thank
Um
you. Thanks.
yeah, I did you want to elaborate any more on this or
Um, well, part of that journey is realizing like certain skills are transferable from one job to another. You know what I mean? Like
oh,
just showing up and like having a good attitude
yeah.
and being positive and saying what you're going to do and then doing what you said you were going to do,
Mm,
those kinds of things transfer over no matter where you work.
mm-hmm.
So, and then that's working at the church is really where I learned like the whole like relationships matter more than like rules and like
Mm,
policies and procedures. It's more like, hey, how are you doing with this person? How are you doing as a person? Like, are you working on yourself and things like that? And so there's a lot of things that um, I learned working at Gwinnett Church that now make me even better in this IT world of corporate, structures and all that stuff. And so,
oh
um,
wow.
yeah, there's a wealth of knowledge that I picked up in those 3.5 years. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, like, I guess, it's funny. That's a good question I should have asked you about, how
yeah,
that transition was for you. But
yeah,
I think for myself, it was like this assumption of just a lot of assuming things about
yeah,
you and
uh,
your job. But then, it's so enlightening for me to hear that you've grown more from your church work
Yeah.
and it's helped you in your IT work now.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think for anyone that's like working in a kind of like a black and white IT job or
Mm-hmm.
anything that's like super boxy feeling,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
there are things we can still do to bring a life to that world, you know?
Mm.
And so there's uh, just understanding and working on yourself, understanding your wiring. I
Mm-hmm.
think it goes a long way when you start to have conversations with people in a corporate environment. Because a lot of times I'll explain stuff through the lens of like me as a person and my needs and my like how I work best and my energy levels and stuff like that.
Yes.
And it kind of gives people permission to see me as a human. And then we can have like human to human conversations instead of like, this very formal, corporate speak,
Yeah, yeah,
So,
absolutely. And I think
yeah.
we waste a lot of time keeping it like that,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Man, that's so good. That's really good stuff. I mean, like, and also, it also kind of, for me, what I hear from your story right now is like literally, it would be easy to maybe for somebody to see, oh, like maybe you wasted time, right?
hmm
But it's not, because like really everything happens for a reason, and you grow from every experience in
Yes.
order to translate it to something else, that the next thing that you're doing
Yeah.
too.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
yeah. um well, Mike, I want to ask you about what we talked about at the very beginning too, about the workshop that you did for
hmm
my church and on financial literacy and what I know to be as financial freedom, as people call it too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I was wondering if you could share a little bit with me about yours and Jean's kind of journey
Sure.
through financial literacy, learning about it, and how it impacted you and your family.
Yeah. And so this is one of those topics when you talk about money, it can get uncomfortable, or some people are like have very strong opinions about money.
Mm,
And so or some people just don't know and are afraid to ask and
yes.
just follow what everyone else is doing, what it looks like everyone else is doing. And so
Mm,
I think that was me growing up. Like I didn't know much about money, didn't know who to ask, kind of had some life lessons from my dad, but also it wasn't like a intentional topic of conversation like
mm,
here's how to handle money, here's how to build wealth. And so um, kind of went the regular route, graduated college with student loan debt,
yeah.
got my
Can I
first
just
job.
interrupt
Yeah.
real quick? Sorry,
Yeah.
Mike. I just want to also say, just to go a little bit deeper, like, I
Yeah.
think the real thing is like, okay, this might cause tension, but like,
Mhm.
like, I think in immigrant families too,
Yep.
right? Like,
Yeah.
it's not talked about much
hmm
because a lot of times people are just living paycheck to paycheck,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And there's not much saving going on.
Yeah.
And you just kind of, and even you might, like, I think maybe I would go as far to say as I grew up kind of seeing like us cut corners in certain areas too.
hmm
So we don't really talk about it, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so I think that's why it's important for me to be able to share your story in this
Yeah.
platform, because
Yeah.
I've learned so much. My David and I have learned so much from that
Yeah.
workshop as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, I just wanted to put that out there because um it's not uncommon, right? Like
Right.
coming from an Asian American family, an
hmm
immigrant family
It's
where
survival mode.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. And so you grow up like everything is scarce. You gotta like it's just everyone's just trying to put food on the table, and it's either that or like status mode. Like
Yeah.
once you see someone get something, everyone's talking about that one person that has that one thing, and everyone wants to buy that thing. It could be anything. It could be a bag, it could be a car, a
Yeah.
house. So there's like survivor mode and status mode, and so um, that was kind of like part of the, I don't know, the ignorance that I had.
Yes.
Yeah.
Myself as well. Yes.
Yeah. And so knowing that hey, there could be a different way to
Mm,
approach money rather than just trying to get as much as you can and like spend as much as possible and buy all the nicest things and then brag about it to your neighbors. Like there's another way to like have peace along the way and like have a sense of freedom with
right,
your money and your time. And
right.
so, but there's not a lot of examples of that in the
Mm,
Asian American community. And so,
mhm.
um, part of why, yeah, that's such a good point, because part of why I'm like so passionate about it is because I didn't have those examples. And so I want to try to learn something and be as much of an example as I can to the next generation coming up.
Yeah.
And so,
Absolutely. And all
yeah,
that to say before, I'm so sorry. Before you
yeah,
continue, I want to hear
yeah,
obviously, but um just to reiterate, it it's not our parents' fault. I
it's
I
not.
don't think.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
just they did their best. Everyone just
right,
did their best. And so I
right.
just feel like that's important to highlight as well,
Yeah,
in talking about this topic, and even you mentioning, it is finances, money, it's always kind of a
yeah.
like there's uncomfortable feeling, right? But
Hmm, hmm.
but anyway, all that to say, you were talking about how you had
Yeah,
some loans and stuff.
right. Well, I like your point. Like, it's not our parents' fault,
Mm.
but to move forward, like at some point, it has to become somebody's responsibility. Like once you
Yes.
hear this information, you can't just ignore it and be like, well, it's not my fault that I'm like this and I'm going to keep going on. Like you have to start taking responsibility. Even if you're hearing this for the first time and this is the first time you're hearing about a way to handle money,
Mm.
the fault part is now in the past. And now
Mhm.
it's your responsibility
This is
to
true.
move forward
Yes.
and to take this information and do something with it. And
Yeah, I
so,
love that.
yeah. Um, and so Yeah, I had all the loans. I had student loans. I had car payments, and I had like a credit card. And this was like right when I graduated college. And so I had, on one hand, I had a nice college degree, a piece of
Mm.
paper that said I graduated. But on the other hand, I'm like, if I died that day, I would be negative financially. I'm like, what did this, like, how did I get here where I
Mm.
spent 21 years of my life to get this piece of paper? And if I died, I'm like a negative financial, I'm adding negative financial value to the world. And so that was just not a good feeling. And so,
Mm.
I'm working hard, but like realizing like, living paycheck to paycheck, but because I had all these loans and because I didn't know any better. But that's where I was. And then um, me and Jean, we got married, and she was living paycheck to paycheck, but never went negative. So she would make some money, but then spend it all, make it, spend it, make it, spend it. And so she was kind of bumping along like that. And then we got introduced to a guy, Dave Ramsey, who people have opinions about him, and which is fair. Like, but I think the core principles of what he's teaching do come from a good place. Like
Mm.
the idea of getting out of debt and staying out of debt and building wealth and living below your means. Those
Mm.
are things he also touches on a lot. And so
Mm.
those principles was our introduction to the world of like financial literacy and financial management.
Mhm.
And so um, fortunately, by the time we got married, I was able to pay off my debt um,
Mm.
because I was living overseas in India and Romania. Like company, they were paying for my housing and all that stuff, and so I paid back all my student loans, paid back my car. But then, like right when I came to America, I bought another car with car payments and went right back into debt. And so, um, I think by the time we got married, I had paid that car off, but it was like I didn't know what I was doing. I just happened to be debt free at that moment that we got married.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I was my plan. If it was up to me, I'd probably buy a house and buy a car and like
Mm.
take on more debt. And so, but we intersected with this teaching from Dave Ramsey, um, and so we read a story about a couple that was like young and dual income, no kids, and they had a goal of paying for their first house in cash, and so they lived in like an apartment and kind of like lowered their standard of living, and that was like a big inspiration for us. We were like, I
Mm.
think we can do something like that. And so um, we just decided to kind of live well below our means in our early years of marriage. And so we rented an apartment that was, it was pretty cheap for that time. And then kind of didn't eat out a lot, made a lot of sacrifices, cut up our credit cards. We approached, we had a big savings goal, but we
Mhm.
approached it as if it was like this huge burden of debt, you know? And so we
Mm.
attacked that savings goal as if it was a huge debt. And so it took about 4 years to get there, but we saved up and hit our goal, and then we were able to buy our first house with cash. And then now, you know, we still live kind of frugally. That was almost 10 years ago. But just that experience and going through that kind of refined us as people and taught us like, hey, there's a different way to do life.
Mm.
You don't have to like live like everybody else, you know?
Mm.
And so it I don't like I used to like sharing that story a lot, but now I'm like I don't want to come off as like, you know, like I don't know. It does feel funny like telling people we live in a paid for house, but at some point I want people to know that it's possible too. You know,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you don't have to follow the norm. Um, not everyone's gonna choose to do this path that we did, but it is a path that is out there for you. You know, and
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
it is I feel like when you tell the story,
mm-hmm.
it's a little bit downplayed because
uh
because you lived it so
yeah,
long ago,
yeah,
but like to say that you guys lived below your means and saved for 4 years to
yeah,
buy a what I know to be a very nice house, right?
mm-hmm.
And like to be not have to pay a mortgage month to month is
Mm-hmm.
like pretty incredible,
Mm-hmm.
you know. I have more questions, but did you want to speak more about what?
No, feel free to ask your
Okay,
question.
so I was
Yeah,
gonna I was gonna ask,
yeah,
like, so I feel like the house part, especially
yeah,
now that I'm an adulting and a parent
yeah,
and
yeah.
have a family of my own, is a very big financial like you don't have that burden of the mortgage month to
Right,
month, right?
right. Yeah.
Um, so with that being said, like did you have other payments like car payments or anything like that after buying the house?
No, so that was part of the process is like, hey, if we're gonna save up and
Mm.
pay for this house, like we are gonna we're gonna get rid of every single payment and not sign up for any more. And so when it came time to buy another car, we weren't looking at new cars. We were looking at used cars that we had cash to pay for.
Mm.
And that was new to me because I I was inexperienced. I never bought a used car. I was like, how do you do this? How do you do this without getting ripped off or like
Right,
buying a
right.
lemon, you know? So it was like intimidating. So but we were like, well, if we're gonna commit to this, we gotta commit to this. And so
Mm.
let's do it. So our first used car, it was a minivan. We bought it on CarMax because that was like it was like the middle ground for us. Like it wasn't brand new, but it wasn't like buying from a personal seller,
Right.
you
It
know?
goes through like a lot of checks and stuff too.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. But you still pay a premium, but now like since then we've bought we we bought a couple of other used minivans from different people. And so
Mm.
that was, you know, from a personal seller. And so um but stuff like that, those decisions, even though they're small, you know, we could have bought a new car, but we're choosing a certain I guess standard of living, and we don't want to just increase it because even if our salaries go up, we're content with where we are. And so um, we joke that we'll probably just our next car is going to be another used minivan, even though
Yeah.
like we'll have the money to buy something better. Like right now, this is a season of used minivans for us.
Mm,
And so
mm.
um, but those kinds of lifestyle bumps or you know, increasing lifestyle, we tried it for sure. Like we tried to buy some of the nice things, but it was just like more maintenance for us and we didn't
Yeah.
really enjoy it. And so now last summer we got rid of a lot of things. Like we purged a lot of our belongings, and so
Mm.
most of our stuff, furniture wise, for example, is like Costco fold out tables.
Yeah.
And so we have like probably 8 of them just right now set up. And so we like our dinner table right now is a Costco fold out table with the Costco fold out benches in our garage, and that's where we have most of our meals. So we don't have like a fancy dinner table or anything. We're
Who
just
needs one, really?
yeah, yeah,
If
we're
we're completely 100% honest. But
yeah,
okay, so um, you buy the house,
yeah.
which I'm sure was like, did it feel like so amazing?
It did. Yes.
I can't even, I mean, I'm sure I would feel so accomplished, but and then you don't have any other payments,
Hmm.
and so, to me in my head, right,
Hmm.
being who I am today in the season that I'm in right now,
Yeah,
it makes sense to me. But
yeah,
for somebody that's hearing this for the first time, I think there would be like, okay, like, but why?
right.
Like, what is the purpose of that?
Yeah,
So what? Like, what? Yeah.
yeah. There are it's a good question because you know there's a temptation to want to just spend on today and like
Of
only think
course,
about
yeah.
today, because tomorrow's never promised. And so, but I think there's like a balance.
Mm,
There's wisdom in knowing that tomorrow is also coming. So you have
mm,
to be prepared. And so, for us, I think that the hidden thing that we didn't see coming in a good way, like the benefit of choosing to live like this, is we have so much more freedom and autonomy with our
mm,
time, you know and so time is something you can't pay to get more of. Like it's there and it's gone. And so um, this this debt-free life, this no house payment, it's given us more control of how we spend our time. And
mm,
so and it's given us, you know for example, me switching jobs and switching back, like I'm free to do that because we don't have to make a lot of money to live a certain way, like
mm,
everything's paid for. And so now it's like, how do we make the most of the time we have and use it in the right spots in our lives?
mm,
And so if it's hard to grasp, but I do know this, like we've advised a lot of younger people when they have these big decisions to make, like where do I go to school, or like what kind of job should I get, or um, choices that where one option is a debt-free option and the other option has debt. We've just advised, like, figure out a way to do the debt-free option and trust that God's gonna bless that path. And
mm,
we've seen it over and over. Like people that are passionate about a certain thing, but it might not make a lot of money. Like, but you won't go into debt. Like, try it out. Like, if you can do that and not go into debt, you will still have options to choose something else.
mm,
And
mhm,
so um, there's a number of people that come to mind as I'm saying this, because we didn't know how their lives were going to turn out. And this was
mhm,
years ago, but they would ask us and we would say, well, based on what we know of like the way the world works and like principles in the world, if you choose the option that like puts a load of debt on your back, most of your other options are gone.
mm,
But
mm.
if you choose this other option of, little by little, like slow and steady, then you can still have options to do something else. And so
Yeah.
I think that is where it's hard to see that in the moment, um, but that's the approach that I would advise for younger
Yeah,
people. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, for anyone listening and maybe being a little bit motivated and inspired by your story that you're sharing right now, and truly it impacts and affects their own futures. Do you have any like advice or resources on how to even start? I mean, because it's kind of daunting,
yeah,
honestly.
yeah.
Like if you've
It is.
never.
I would say this, and I've done this before. Like people, when I was younger, and if I saw somebody like me, I would be like pretty intimidated because it looks a certain way, like from the
Mm,
outside,
mm-hmm,
but in it, it's like I'm like very like free, childlike, like I'm like a kid at heart. And so, and I don't mind sharing. And so if
Mm,
people want to reach out to me to ask, I'm an open book. Like
mm,
I've had conversations with people that first time I meet them, we can talk about money, and I can help where I can help, or
mm.
teach what I've learned. And so that's number one. Like I hope people know, like they're free to reach out to me. You can put my contact information out there, and I'm okay with that. Like that's part of that's life giving to me. And
Yes.
so, but resource wise, there's all kinds of resources. But it's on you to look at them. So there's
Yeah.
there's Dave Ramsey, um there's like the whole FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early, FIRE.
Oh,
And
I
there's
didn't.
there's a podcast called Choose FI, like Choose Financial Independence.
Okay.
They do a great job. They go through they go through this stuff at a very extreme level in a good way. Like they
Mm,
give you a lot of motivation. Um, there's podcasts out there. So I don't know. I think the biggest thing is like starting to take responsibility of it,
yeah.
because I think knowing that you can take a different path than the one that you grew up in, because
Yeah.
a lot of this you're going to learn, it's going to come back to your like childhood things you missed out on, things you wanted when you were a kid you didn't get, that now
Mm,
you have the money to buy. So there's going to be some personal growth involved.
yeah.
So yeah.
Awesome. Man, yeah. I mean, yeah, guys, I feel like if I was hearing this for the first time, I wouldn't even know how to start. So
Yeah.
I think connecting with Mike and Jean and
Yep.
yeah, I mean, just kind of again taking your own responsibility to
Yeah.
check out resources and listen to podcasts and learn more about what it means to be financially literate is um, honestly like probably some of the best advice
Yeah.
maybe this podcast could ever give. I mean, there's been some great people. All my guests are amazing, including you, Mike. But I feel like um, stewarding well,
Mm-hmm.
like especially if you call yourself a Christ follower,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if you believe in God and or if you don't, I
Mm-hmm.
just think stewarding your life well is part of stewarding your finances well too. So,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely. And here's as you were talking, I realized that the other reason I don't mind putting myself out there is because um, I don't make money on this, like on
mm,
giving this advice. Whereas that was the tension I felt learning this stuff. Like sometimes I'd be learning from someone, like, wait, if I learn from you, but I have to pay you to learn, then are you running a scheme of some sort,
oh,
Whereas like,
interesting.
yeah,
Yes.
like, and it's such a weird, but it crossed my mind. Like, I know this person's doing well in teaching this, but they're also making money. So is this some kind of scam? And so that's what I initially thought of Dave Ramsey, if I'm being
Mm,
honest. But now having been through it as like a normal person with like a normal job, that
mm,
I don't work in the financial industry, I'm not going to like try to sell anybody anything.
mm.
um, I just know like there are certain principles, and through all the people I've met who've done this, certain things work and other things will seem like they work, but they don't. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that's great.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, to circle it back around, Mike, before we close our time together,
Yeah.
um, I wanted to, if we go back to your job,
Yeah.
I, I wanted to know, yeah, like what is, do you think is like the worst thing about your job or the thing you like least about your job,
Yeah.
your day to day?
Well, I took some notes because you sent me the questions, and so
Right,
the
right.
the thing out like the hardest part of my job is probably because it deals with people's pay, that like
Mm-hmm.
certain deadlines are like you got to make them no matter what. And so as
Mm-hmm.
flexible as it is, and as much as I love working from home,
Mm-hmm.
there comes a point like every week where I'm like, this is crunch time, like we got to get this done. If there's an error, we got to fix it. And so that's probably the one thing I don't like about the job.
Okay.
But it's not that bad of a thing if you can kind of build around that,
Yeah.
like block that time off. um trying to think what else.
Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry,
Yeah.
what you just said. So, like, are there some errors or problems that just take a long time to fix?
Yeah. Or there's some that take a long time to fix because they're it can get pretty complicated, like the number of things that is related to that error.
Oh, so it's like
Um,
almost like a trick. That's why you said detective, because like
yeah, yeah,
you have
you
to
got to
figure
trace that.
out.
Yeah, it's like you're doing forensics on like, wait, what happened? And you got to look at like it's gone. Like the error could be gone, but you have to look at like evidence that it was there at some point. And so you're looking at all these like this history of stuff, like reading through logs and stuff. And so you're kind of piecing together a scenario that caused the error, but that scenario is done, like a murder, So I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And
That
so
makes more sense.
that's probably the thing I don't like about the job.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think one thing I hope people realize, like when it comes to any job, is you are replaceable. Like eventually you will get replaced. And so
Mm,
um, hopefully you're not holding on too much to that job as your source of identity, because
mm,
at some point you will be replaced in the job you do in your profession.
yes,
Yeah.
that's so real, Mike.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that's how I've approached. But again, this is like part of like working or like understanding the mafia way of things is like
Mm,
knowing that you're just the role is there, you're filling the role,
right.
but eventually you will move on to a different role. And so
Yes.
you kind of just steward that role and talk about it, but you can not like cling on to that as like
Mm,
that's you.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so yeah, just letting people know like, hey, while I'm here, like I want to make sure this thing gets done and gets
Mm,
done right because we might not be here. This team might not be here when this problem happens next year. So
right, right.
yeah, just speaking like that's helped
Wow.
me understand things.
That's like puts a lot of things into perspective for me.
Yeah.
That's good. Okay, well then what do you like the best about your job?
Oh, what do I like the best? Right now, it's I can fit this job around my life.
Mm,
Like, um, you know, I went through a season early in my 20s where my whole like my life was wrapped up in my work. But now it's I I don't let work get in the way of life anymore, and
mm,
so the flexibility of this job is priceless for me.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It's I think yeah, really it is. I feel like that's one of the things that David and I are both realizing,
Mm-hmm.
and I think the pandemic it's like a after effect of it, kind of like, oh, the grass is always green, a little bit greener on the other side when we look at
Mm-hmm.
other people like work from home and stuff like that. And
Yeah,
um, but yes, flexibility. That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Um, well, before we end our chat tonight, Mike, I
Mm-hmm.
was wondering, do you have any advice about it could be, I mean, I feel like the whole podcast really was just advice, like amazing advice.
uh,
But anything to add, like whether it's somebody thinking about like your job specifically, it's like, oh, this seems interesting.
mm-hmm.
Any advice for them, or just any life advice other than the amazing nuggets you've been giving us tonight?
Yeah. Well, so I thank you for that. I mean, this is probably one of the few times I was able to like sit and think about some of these questions, and so
Mm,
that's where I'm like, I hope someone listening would get this out of this conversation. So
mm,
the two things that I wrote down was number one to it goes back to money, but like if you can stay out of debt, you have options, and so you can take chances, you can take
mm,
more risks, you can be a little more bold, you can follow that passion
yeah.
as long as you don't have like financial obligations. And so um, that's something like we've been teaching our own kids even to this at their young age. We're like, hey, you don't want to have debt, like you know we're debt free and let's stay debt free. And they're like, what
Mm,
does that mean? I'm just like, we don't owe anyone anything, and so
mm,
we don't want to owe people money.
mm,
We can give money and we can but we don't want to like borrow money,
Mm.
And so staying out of debt is number one. And then I think number two, what I'm realizing now, and this might be a hard concept to grasp for some of the younger listeners, but um, really start to know yourself and know your story, because I think the better we know ourselves, the more we're going to know like what kind of work energizes us, or what kind of work comes naturally to us, what kind of work is life-giving for us. And if we do more of those things, and we're free to do that because we're out of debt, then I think like more paths will open up, and
Yes.
more like unconventional type of work can open up
Mm.
if we know ourselves better. And so this is something like I wish I did earlier. I wish I knew myself a little more, but I'm learning myself now, and I'm realizing, wait, this job is actually a good fit for me because
Mhm.
of the things I get to do. And so, um, but I think when you're younger, you're trying to make your mark. You're trying to like prove something to someone, or you're trying to live up to someone else's expectations, and
Mhm.
that kind of runs counter to knowing yourself, And so um, that's something that you can start with like personality assessments, and
Mm.
Enneagram, and like temperament, and like learning all that stuff,
Yes.
because it does matter, I think, when you're going to spend a good chunk of your time in a profession. So
Yeah, no, that's a great point to make.
yeah.
I don't know if anyone has articulated in the way that you just did. And
Hmm.
I think even thinking about my own life,
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time trying to please people,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And make sure they're happy.
Hmm.
And then even before realizing the things that I'm good at
Hmm.
and enjoy and how like my brain works.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it wasn't until I was older,
Uh-huh.
that I was able to kind of be more self-aware.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
yeah, that's a great point. And yeah, and like my first personality test was the Myers-Briggs.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
felt like so David and I took that together,
Yeah.
and I felt like it opened like so many like like I was like, wow, like this is
Right.
why
Yeah.
X, Y, and Z. And then, like,
Hmm.
even we work with a team at our church, right? And
Hmm.
even finding out their personalities.
Exactly.
And it's like, oh, this is why we need to work like this and
Right.
not like this, instead of butting heads and
Hmm.
things like that. So, yeah, like that's great advice.
Yeah. Thanks. And so, yeah, I think you're right. Like the better you know yourself, the more you can like have bandwidth to understand other people, and then
Yes.
you get into those relationships, and then it's the mafia,
It's a mafia
And so
again. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so it's all related. So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Well, Mike, thank you again so much for
no problem.
giving me your time tonight and
Yeah.
sharing so much information and wisdom,
Oh,
truly
this was a
wisdom.
lot of fun. Thanks, Blair.
Yeah,
You're
I
doing a
had
great job. I think this whole platform is such a good idea. So I'm excited to share this with the people around me. So
Oh, well, thank you for saying that. It's extremely encouraging. Thanks again, Mike. And you
yeah.
guys, you heard it here throughout. Mike is so willing to connect with you. So if you have any questions about the podcast or for Mike, feel free to reach out. You can DM me through social media, or you can email me at podcastwigu@gmail.com. Thanks so much again, Mike. Thanks, guys,
All
for
right.
listening.
Thanks, Blair.
Bye.
Bye.
Until next time.
See ya.